Hello, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this panel, Aesthetics of the Unscripted Cinema Beyond the Page, part of this year's Amman International Film Festival. This conversation explores how filmmakers approach stories that resist traditional scripting, stories shaped by memory, displacement, and unstable realities. In these cases, linear structures often can't hold the emotional and political weight of experience. So filmmakers turn to form, non-linear editing, fragmentation, oral storytelling, silence, and improvisation to express what can't always be said in words. We're calling this kind of work unscripted cinema, not because it lacks structure, but because it resists formula. It's a cinema where aesthetics carry the emotional and political weight of memory and trauma, and where form itself becomes a space for resistance, reflection, and imaginative survival. We're lucky today to be joined by three remarkable voices whose work has powerfully engaged with these ideas, each from a different angle of cinematic practice. Allow me to introduce each of them. We will start with Jihan El-Tahri, is a filmmaker, writer, and producer whose documentaries explore political history and identity across Africa and the Arab world. Her acclaimed works include Nasser, Behind the Rainbow, and Cuba and Africa Odyssey. She's a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and an international mentor for emerging filmmakers. Gladys Joujou is a Lebanese film editor and story consultant whose credits include Ghost Hunting, Talking About Trees, and Bye Bye Tabariya. She brings a deep understanding of nonlinear and hybrid storytelling and also support the next generation of filmmakers through membership and international documentary labs. And last not least, Mike Lerner is an award-winning documentary producer and director with over 30 years of experience bringing complex geopolitical stories to global audiences. His acclaimed films include The Square, Hell and Back Again, and the last one, The Mission. His work has earned Oscar and BAFTA nominations, along with Emmy, Sundance, and many other awards. Please join me in welcoming our panelists and let's begin the conversation. I would like to start with a broad question. I would like each of you, if you can just tell me what does unscripted cinema means to you? Would you describe it as a formula, strategy, a political act, or something else entirely?
There you go.
Well, we were having an interesting discussion yesterday about the translation of the Arabic of unscripted, and we felt that off script was a more accurate translation. So that's already a start to the complications of this conversation. I mean, to me, this phrase has come into common use in the last few years amongst broadcasters and streamers, and they define their departments as unscripted, head of unscripted. They used to be called non-fiction, and before that they were probably called documentary. And to me, I think what is pernicious about it is that it's trying to co-opt the drama, integrity, fantasticness of direct cinema and real observational documentary into the more compliant space. I mean, we never had a script to begin with. You can't be off script if you never had one. And in fact, very much, I think, I don't know if my two panelists will agree with me, but very much part of what we do is to not have a script and to be able to respond spontaneously and in real time to the events that we're trying to capture and trying to portray. So So I think it's a problematic term.
You.
Okay. Yes, yesterday I was seeing Kharij al-Nas in Arabic. That's why I thought, but Kharij al-Nas is not unscripted. Because it's Kharij al-Nas for me is when there is a path or a stream, whatever story, and all of a sudden you come and you tell something that is out of this line, that is being awaited for you. So that's why unscripted, I didn't understand it. And then there's this thing of, yes, we don't script. We do script. I always tell my directors that you have to script, even if you go out of the script. But to do films, you have to script. And I struggle for that. You cannot say, oh, I'll go and shoot and I'll see what happens. This is where you cannot get a true language to your film. So yeah, for me, Kharij al-Nas off script, we found was more because we are talking about as well, doing documentaries is political. So this mainstream or this whatever Nas, whatever script is political and is not made by us from the South. And this is where we have to go out of the script so that we can tell our stories. This is how I see it.
I'm not gonna repeat what my colleagues have said, but I think for me, unscripted, I'm not gonna get into the semantics of it, but rather what is the space of alternative, and the formatting that is currently binding us to a kind of a box, and that is what works. And what space do we have to almost trick? How do we infiltrate that box with a language and with a vision and with a space that we can identify with? Because the script, in a way, is part of the format which is acceptable. And when it's acceptable, it's thus fundable. And when it's fundable, it then becomes a film. So how do we find that space of alternative and the cracks that allow us to sit within the fundable and what will become, yet have that space to be and reflect who we are and who we can be?
Oh my God, you already answered my second question. Okay, I will jump the other. I would like to ask you also, can you share a moment where you intentionally broke from a written script to more conventional structure? Like, yeah, okay, please go ahead.
Should I? Okay. I mean, few people, I mean, most of the people know my last 8 films, but I actually started my filmmaking with experimental. And after experimental, I did observational and ended up with talking heads. Normally, it's the other way around, And it was a very intentional one because the experimental and the observational, I felt, started from a premise that did not serve why I make film. Because every now and then you have to step back and say, Anna, what am I doing? Because this is not a very, like my father spent his life saying, find yourself a job, Hashan Khatri. So it's engagement with film. You have to really every now and then step out and think, why am I doing this? And I figured out quite late in the game, I'd done already 10 or 11 films, quite late in the game, I figured out that my issue is an issue of vantage point. Where am I telling the story from, and why do I want to tell it from this space? I'm from the South, and my narrative is from the South, and I need to establish the groundwork of the South. And I figured out that the West spent 50 years doing talking heads. They established their history, they established what the Holocaust is, they established all these fundamentals that we now take for granted. Then they went into innovation. We come into the game, they saying, no, you can't do this, innovation. If you're not innovative, you're not interesting. And I said, well, I don't particularly want to be interesting. We haven't done the work that allows us to do that. So basically, I went to Talking Heads, which was definitely not sexy and definitely much more difficult to fund. And people say, oh, but no commentary. Leah Ammi, why no commentary? Do you know what the film's about, if it needs or it doesn't need? So it was a moment where all these books to tick that were a given of how you make a film, I was going against it. But it was a positioning that I felt was the crack, this alternative, that crack, that, okay, and then, yeah, there are not that many, but you don't have to be innovative in order to tell a story properly. So the decision to get out of it, I think, is a decision of why you even make films. I don't know if it makes sense.
But it does. Yeah. So, do you want to, like, if you can just tell us a moment that you felt that you do need to be unscripted, where already you did have structure previously?
Well, unlike Gladys, I mean, I really never have a script. And that is obviously quite difficult when you're trying to sell a film. I mean, most of our films, nearly all our films, are observational films in a moment of crisis, political crisis, somewhere in the world, whether it's Egypt or Russia or wherever. So, you know, and I you know, my model of filmmaking is D.A. Pennebaker's Don't Look Back, if you know that film. I mean, he's a man that invented the handheld camera so that he could get into a taxi with Bob Dylan and go into a hotel room and, you know, literally just be in the room. And really, that's really one of the major principles of what we do. So, you know, I think the problem with script is it's prescriptive. You know, I wouldn't dream of like writing what I thought was going to happen, you know.
Yeah, but I think you misunderstood my script. No, what I'm saying is you have to know what you are going to shoot, even if you don't know what you will shoot. But you have to have in mind, I am going, because if not, you'll be capturing an event. And then what does it mean? You have to know where you put your camera, why you are putting it. So you have to go prepared, but not scripted in a way, okay, I will go and shoot this and this and this. You just prepare yourself. I mean, this is directing for me. If you don't have it, then you'll be a bit lost. You don't know what you will get. And this is what I mean, script. It is at the end when you are editing, it is totally, if you want to call it unscripted, which I'm arguing this thing, but it is, I mean, there is a language, there is a logic. We are humans and we have a logic, and this is how we function. So anyhow, when you do a film, you cannot say, okay, I will put the end in the beginning and the beginning in the end. You have to have a certain logic that belongs to your film. It becomes the logic of your film. It's not a logic that is, every film has its logic, like every human being has its logic, but you have to get into that as if you get in the brain of a film, and you try and but it doesn't mean that you format it as another film. It has its own singularity, and this is where it becomes a strong film, and it comes from somewhere. It cannot come like I go and I will shoot this. And
can I just answer that? To me, the character is the script. So when I go somewhere, I'm not just going to wave the camera about, you know, whatever's happening. My purpose is to be with that one or two or whatever the integral characters are, and stick with them and follow them and try and present their point of view and their experience in the film.
Can I just...
Yeah, sure.
What happens if your character dies? Do you not have a film anymore?
Perhaps not. It depends when they die.
No,
in the beginning of the film, perhaps. If they die at the end of the film because they've been attacked or killed or something, then maybe that's a very powerful film.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that a film, beyond characters, beyond visuals, beyond the aesthetics of it, is about something you need to explore. an idea, a concept, a moment. And the death of any character should not change why and what that is. So I completely understand character-based films, and I agree with it because it takes us down a trajectory. But I do think that that space you allow for things like, I mean, I'm saying that because I've had characters die, and then like, what do I do? Do I stop the film? That's number one. And the other thing, when in the middle of shooting, you see something that completely doesn't correspond to everything you've been doing research about. What do? Do you look the other way? Or do you say, okay, can I tell a story?
Yeah.
I was making a film about food aid, okay? And it was in 2004. 14 million people are going to die, famine, okay? And I'm shooting in Zambia. Famine al-akhir, okay? And as I'm shooting, there's some red in the screen. I'm telling my cameraman, what's the red? And it's like very defensive. No, it's the image. So, okay, stop. Let's go and see what this red is. And there was a tomato field. And like, you're halfway through your film, and then suddenly, if there's a tomato field, is this a famine? What am I doing? What's my film? So your invite was for the BBC, and I had to pick up my phone and say, sorry, I'm going to have to stop this film because there's a tomato field. And it was a big problem because like now it's, you've engaged money, you've engaged the start and the rest of it. And eventually the guy said, okay, given the tomato field, what is the film you can make about the famine given the tomato field? But I did have the option to look the other way. Yalla, put the camera this way and we won't see the red. Or you stop and engage with why the tomato field and why the story of the famine.
Yeah, thank you. Also, if I can, I would like also build on that, ask you, Mike, about your documentaries often respond to urgent, real-time political realities. So how do you maintain narrative coherence in environments that are unstable, unscripted or off-scripted, if we want to say, and emotionally raw? Like,
well, the management of chaos really is the job, you know. And whilst I say, you know, we follow things, and you know, you still got to plan in your head what things mean, and you know, yeah, as you just said, you know, if there's something that contradicts the ideas that you had, or the understanding of the story you had, then clearly you have to stick to the truth and stick to this. So, I mean, there's no easy answer to your question in a way. You just have to. I mean, I think to answer it, for the films we make, the number one most important thing is one's relationship to one's character, because without that, you really don't have a film. And so you do whatever you can to maintain that. And if they get pissed off with you and chuck you out the room, you know, you have to mend that. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but, you know, people are people, and they're under enormous stress, and all kinds of things can happen. So maintaining that relationship is managing the chaos, really, I think, to me.
okay, then this also leads to Gladys. You've worked on films that blur the line between documentary and fiction, such as one of my favorite documentary, and I do think that I hope that everyone has watched this film here. This documentary, Ghost Hunting. So I'm wondering, how does your approach to editing shift the material? Like, doesn't follow a conventional script or structure?
You cannot in documentary say there is a script. I mean, this is what I'm trying to do to say as well, is you prepare your shooting. You go there knowing what you are looking for and being careful to what you will find, and shifting whatever you have to shift so that you are true to yourself and to your subject, or to your film. But then you shoot, so you rewrite, you write. Then you come to the editing and you rewrite. There is editing is writing, especially in documentary. So, and for Ghost Hunting, I mean, Raed Andoni, the director, was so clever in his proposal, and he had decided to put a script, and then inside his script, inside his frame, people started to write stories. So, and this is what happened. And when I got the rushes, we selected. Of course, we could have made 2 or 3 films of the rushes we had, but we had to draw our structure towards what the truth of what he wanted to do, and this is what happened. It's you try and write, and but yeah, in this particular ghost hunting Raed Andoni's film, he had already put a really very clever frame to this film that we had to keep it and to try and be more interesting even than the frame initially, than the idea.
Okay, thank you. This leads also, as you said at the beginning, like your films usually would follow character or archive or something. So I'm asking that your work often revisit political memory through complex visual and archival layering. How do you see the role of aesthetics, particularly fragmentation and archive, in shaping unscripted narratives that carry political and emotional weight?
Okay. I think let's start with archive. Archive is, we're left with fragments, and we kind of try and connect the dots of these fragments. And the process at the beginning, it's fascinating. You find these images that you've never seen, and you put your kind of imaginary and the log line that was given you with the archive, and you think that is the space you're allowed to function in. But then, as I said earlier, but if you're looking at the story from the perspective of the South, you suddenly realize, but this isn't my narrative. Who actually filmed these images? 90% of the archival images we have are colonial reels. So the eye that shot these films is not my eye. It's actually the inverse of what I want to say. And so I think it becomes, I absolutely love this academic and writer called Sadia Hartman. She wrote an essay called Venus in Two Acts. And basically the point is that the slave women in the transatlantic trade doesn't exist. All the women are called Venus. So the story of women of the transatlantic trade doesn't exist. So what do you mean? Do you mean that she doesn't exist? Or do you allow yourself to reimagine? And she calls it critical fabulations. So you go from believing the archive as a given historical fact to allowing yourself this vantage point of how do I translate this archive in order to reflect on my current reality. Because how else do you shift if you stay stuck in their perception of what they want to hand us down? I guess what I could say, it's the line between official history and memory. How do we bridge this gap? How do we appropriate our history through the little fragments that was left for us?
Isn't this also was one of the main problems with the archive about the Palestinians, and at the beginning when the UN and Red Cross, all those
completely. I mean, yeah. I think on the one hand, and I'm not diminishing the importance of the existence of this archive, because otherwise we wouldn't have material to engage with. But if you look at the early UNRWA, the way you see Palestinians becomes people in tents, and you cannot see them otherwise. It's about this sense of victimization, rightfully so. But does it become the only prism, which was followed with the first generation of Palestinian cinema, which shifted to mobilization footage? So every single image you get is about the struggle and the weapon. So then you get caught between the refugee and the gun. Now, both are important and both are part of our history. And luckily, these images continue to exist. But our job as filmmakers, I think, is these silent spaces in between. How do we shed light on the silenced, I guess?
Exactly. Okay, Mike, do you allow me to ask you about the transnationality, because you're also director and producer. So I'm wondering, do you think that transnational nature of a film's production influences a director's aesthetic choices, especially when dealing with unscripted or emotionally complex realities?
Well, I think yes and no. I mean, I think, just as we believe in justice for all, we believe that we can tell stories about anything. I mean, very often in all the films I make, I totally involve and work with, indigenous, local, domestic people. And but I do think there's something to be gained by having an external perspective. I mean, it's just like if I was going to, I mean, I've hardly ever made a film about UK. And I don't know what that would be. So, of course, we stand accused of colonialism, of parachuting into other people's stories. But I think it's still, I mean, in my heart, I still think it's better to do that than to not do it and not have these stories told. I appreciate the privilege I have as a white Western person in being able to get these films made when others can't. But I hope what we do is enabling other people to get other stories told. But, of course, others would accuse me of other things. So that's what we can say.
Very interesting. Gladys.
Yes.
Many of the films you've edited deal with memory, trauma, and displacement. How do you use editing, particularly fragmentation or rhythm, to evoke emotional and psychological states that aren't directly spoken?
Okay. No, first of all, I really believe that films are, or scenes in films are made of emotions and tensions. So it's always, I'm looking for this. And like you are talking about archival footage, and I can only think about the last film I did with Lina Sualem, Bye Bye Tiberias, where it was a really challenging, because we had so many layers of archival footage, black and white, of her personal archival footage, and more. And what I thought, what I encounter, and it's for Palestinian history, is when you find an archival footage in historical, it becomes really a treasure. And you want to put it in a as if you want to frame it, such as, and to reclaim it. It's your story. It's you want to make of it, you s'approprier, appropriate the story. So it's how can you make this? And for instance, we found in 1940s at Pathé archival footage of Tabariya. And it wasn't first in our storyline, but it was unthinkable not to keep it in the film, because the film becomes archival. And what happened is we put sounds on it. There was Arabs in Palestinians in the place, and we had to see these images, because seeing it is. This is how you reclaim it, because usually the story official is saying that they didn't exist, or there is nothing to prove. So it becomes sometimes that you want to tell with this fragmentation a storyline that you think is linear, but it's made of many fragmented moments, and it becomes one. And this is one of the challenge, I think. No?
Okay, this also on the other way. In your work, especially when dealing with liberation movements or complex national histories, how do you navigate the ethics of representing memory, especially when that memory is fragmented, constanted, or still politically charged? Like how?
I'm not sure I even attempt to represent memory. I think what I'm most interested in are the stories, and the anecdotes, because bridging that gap between what becomes a given and this lived experience, this our day-to-day reality, because we can't forget that I only do historic films, not to look at the past, but actually to look at the future. So how do we construct our past in a way that allows us to deal with our future? It's not about nostalgia. I'm not really interested in nostalgia. I do agree with her. How do we appropriate these moments and allow others to see them from a different angle? Complexifies the story. And I think that's really important, complexifying our stories. And that's one thing. And the other thing, there are convictions that are sometimes quite problematic. So I'll tell you another story. I did this film in South Africa. I interviewed Nelson Mandela 3 times, which I was really happy about. And of course, he's going to be in the film. I mean, it's Nelson Mandela. But while telling the story that I set out to tell, part of the problem was that Mandela did not engage. And because he didn't engage, the trajectory of history shifted. Now, I believe that we need our icons. We need to look up to people like us who we believe are important landmarks. And for me, Mandela is a landmark. So I do not want in my film to deconstruct him. I just don't want to. This is me. So what do I do now? I just didn't put him in my film because his silence, his absence from that narrative was actually all I needed to say. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, totally.
Now, of course, my producers were pulling their hair. We have interviews with Mandela. Why are you not putting them in? Because I would do him harm. I would do his legacy harm. And I don't want to do that because I don't think for our future, that's a positive thing. I'm not looking at the past. I'm looking at the future thing.
Yeah, this is amazing because also this highlight the importance of absence or silence moments at the films. And this totally leads me to ask Mike, what aesthetic or ethical considerations guide your choices when structure has to follow lived experience?
Well, I think the most important for a film to do is to convey the truth of any matter. And sometimes to tell the truth, you have to cut corners or make decisions that aren't necessarily in line with that truth, I think, but it doesn't happen very often because most of our films are literally reportage, as it were, and in the moment, so things happen or they don't happen. But I think why do we make these films? We make these films to convey a moral conviction that we have, that we feel the world should share. And so whatever serves that ultimately, I think, is allowable.
Thank you. Gladys, you've worked across vastly different cultures and cinematic traditions. Have you noticed shared aesthetic strategies among filmmakers working with unscripted or emotionally charged material across borders?
I'm not sure I understand. What do you mean?
You've worked with many filmmakers from very different cultures and backgrounds and also stories and emotion. However, yeah, I know that all emotion, like all human beings, they do have a common emotions for stuff. But from you as a person who's working on the post-production where the documentary would be created,
I think this is why sometimes I don't like to put things in frames, because there's always more freedom to tell a story, because every director and every film is different and has its own world. I tend to, what I look for is really the truth of the moment. It's not the truth in general, it's the truth of what is happening in front of my eyes and how I can make it work, that it becomes a film that you can watch, because it's you engage the audience. When you do a film, it's engaging, it's a language between you and the film. So this is something that really, it's a mixture. It's you join all these things and you try and to express more myself. Let's say I have the film that is really, I say, oh my God, what can I do with these rushes? I change sometimes the way I look, the way I gaze to the rushes, and I say, okay, this is maybe the weakness, but how can I make of this weakness the strength of the film? And it becomes its own language. So this is how I see things. I am not, there is no limits, in fact. All I want is that the experience of the film exists, and each one is different because each one is made by different languages, and I really look to find singularity. I want to do that. I'm looking for that while I'm cutting, while I'm editing.
Now I'm curious to ask you that, as how Jihan said that she decided like to remove Mandela, and this is very brave, to be honest, to remove the interview from the film. Unpopular at all. So I'd like to ask you as well, Gladys, have you ever faced this on the other way? Like you had to convince the director to like kill their darling, because usually killing the darlings, it's very difficult. Like directors, especially in documentaries, they want to keep everything.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the thing. Part of editing is as well to make your director come and see how you see it, because sometimes he or she is stuck somewhere, and you just want them to, to turn the gaze and to see what you are seeing, so that you can discuss, because maybe I'm wrong as well. I need us to become together so we can make the right decision. I can feel things and I can say, oh, no, this won't work. But I need to find out myself, why did I feel this, and how can I make them see what I'm seeing? This way it's not a fight. It's how can we discuss it and make the right choice.
Thank you. And this also lead me to ask you, in films where narrative may be less linear or off-scripted or unscripted, what becomes the organizing principle? Like, is it emotion, theme, visual rhythm, or something else you do feel that make?
I just want to say one thing based on the very interesting conversation here is the word truth. I kind of have an allergy to this word because I don't know what the truth is, and I don't think truth exists in. I always say, like, if you're looking at what is the color of a tree, if you're standing at the bottom, it's brown. If you're standing in the middle, it's brown and green. If you're standing at the top, it's just green. So what is the truth? Truth is in the eye of the beholder. And I think that's what complexifies, especially if you're doing political history. I don't know what the truth is. So I don't think I have a single film that has a conclusion. شعرفني أنا.
No, but this is why I'm saying the truth.
Yeah, and I'm the truth. Yes. I'm talking about not like about what you're saying. I'm saying the word truth is somehow attached to documentary.
Yes.
And I find that very...
I call it truth of the moment. It could be in a fiction.
Yeah, I'm not talking... When I'm talking about truth, I'm not just talking about what you guys said. I'm complexifying the notion of documentary and truth in general. So I personally make films to ask questions that to myself. it really is about, I do not have a way to wrap my head around this. And most of my films end with questions because, and I think if I get answers to my questions, I'll stop making films. It's that search. It's that where do you place things, and how do we get these? It's the bricks of building a wall. Each one of them is a brick, and I always hope that someone else will come, deal with that same material in a different way, because it's that construction, that conversation. And sorry, I forgot your question. It was.
No, I can also say it again. No, I lost my question. Okay. In films where narrative may be less linear or unscripted, what becomes the organizing principle?
Emotion or
Emotion,
rhythm. Anna, I'm a story lover. I love story. I think films, the biggest problem with filmmakers is that you want to put 5 stories in one. The recognition that this one that I'm telling is only one story. Which one? You can do Heidi Bedi, which one shall I take? You can say, this is the most important one for me. But you have to make that choice. And as you said, killing your babies, sometimes like I'll cut something and go home and cry and come back. Tomorrow we'll deal with it. But if you lose sight of this one story that you're trying to follow, to tell, I love anecdotes. I love... It's like, how do you get these really dense and boring, and mostly like when people say, oh, I'd love to watch your film, I usually say, Habibi, you won't love to watch my film. They're very dense. But how do you make this alive with people who can tell you things that are beyond what you see in the headlines? How do you shift the gaze and connect history with the lived experience? And again, it's partly critical fabulations. Critical fabulations is that putting that space between fiction and reality. Who gets to decide? Do you have to have a PhD to be able to say that that's how we connect them? No, and I mean, each one of us has the right to see and critically fabulate. Now, I particularly like the people who were sitting in the room to tell me that story. Now, if you do the kinds of films that I do, you end up meeting everyone who was sitting in that same room. Not one of them tells you the same story. It's fascinating because each person sees history as he was the central part of that narrative. And so the story is told from here, the story is told from here, and it's always they are the center. But there is always the lowest common denominator that you pick out and say, okay, everyone's going to agree on this one. That's my starting point.
Okay, thank you. If you allow me to, my last question before opening the floor to the Q&A. Mike, I would like to ask you also, how do you think, how do audiences respond to nonlinear or experimental structures films?
Well, I mean, hopefully in a positive way. And, of course, there's no risk, no gain, as well. Sometimes you do have to take the risky path. I mean, quite often, I made a film called The Russian Woodpecker. And it's a film about a crazy artist in Ukraine who has a theory about the Chernobyl disaster. And this artist, he has these scenes that are like performance art. I mean, the film ultimately has no particular logic, except, as I said before, the story of this character and what he believes. And then we try to get you to believe what he believes, but of course, that's up to you. So, I think there's no safe route in a way. And I think, if you have the opportunity to test screen and, if there's things that really confuse people and don't work and are against the feeling, then of course it makes sense to respond to that. But otherwise, I think if you're dealing with, something like that, you simply have to believe in what you're doing and risk risk failure. I think that's a really important thing in all this stuff. You know, it's just like there are no. I mean, television and film industry want certainty. They want this is successful. Blah, 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 blah. Well, you get a million bland films that way, right? And when you are prepared to risk failure, I think you have the opportunity to have proper success and indeed and learn from the failure as well. Again, it's a learning process. I mean, every film is, I'm sure you'd agree, it's like starting again. It's like every other film you've ever made doesn't make any difference. You know, you'll make the same mistakes or different mistakes and everything will happen, but that's the beauty of it, you know, in a way. And I think the most important thing is to not rest on your laurels, not consider, well, I did it this way and therefore that's the way it works. I mean, I really think you've got to throw away the book every time and start fresh.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the three of you. And if you allow me. Yeah, our lovely audience. Okay, there's all a hand. Can we start from here? Yeah.
I don't know if I need the mic. It's a small room, but thank you all for today and for Hala. I have two questions, if I may. The first is for Jihan and Gladys, and the other one is for Mike. I forgot to introduce myself. Ahmed Daman, National Public Radio, NPR. So the first question is, we have a problem in the global South and particularly in the Arab world when it comes to academic institutions and film critics, in which the academic institutions teach film students, and the film critics tend to also both disqualify any unscripted film that has talking heads or commentary. How destructive is this for a future generation to kind of disqualify this entire genre, and what can we do about it? And the second question for Mike is, when there is an opportunity for scouting, doesn't that allow sometimes when you have the opportunity to meet the character that you're gonna shoot, as a filmmaker, aren't there wheels already turning in your head, telling you about the themes and the plans that you're planning to focus on that could be called a plan in one way or another, but they are not the same as turning on a camera and just shooting?
Should I? Okay.
They tend to call them long reports sometimes.
No, and they can call them pedagogic. There are all sorts of names. I think the problem is mainly that you don't teach students to listen to their film. The film imposes things on you. Yani the number of devices and innovative things that I've shot to put in the film and lands on the floor, the cutting room floor, is like, voila, you either listen to what it is, this story you want to tell is imposing on you. I know it sounds theoretical, but there are times where you're just trying to, okay, no, I have to put this in, no, I have to put this in. It has to look like it's just not working. And I think listening to your film is really important. Now, there's always the problem now, again, the formatting. I'm not quite clear when it became totally out of fashion to have commentary, but someone somewhere, a funder somewhere said, no commentary. And suddenly we all don't like commentary. I just produced a film a couple of years ago with Karim Aynouz, one of the most beautiful documentaries, in my opinion, ever made. And we tried to do this, and like, he's an amazing filmmaker, Karim Aynouz. So it wasn't the lack of subject, it wasn't the lack of the film needed a commentary. And then finally we said, okay, let's go for it. And the film, people remember the trajectory of the film because of that sound and how that sound, but the amount of resistance to put the commentary was huge. Try this first, try that. And I personally, obviously I come from a different school, I don't understand what is that resistance of the voice. And I also don't understand What is the fascination of putting the filmmaker in the film? These are two things that have become very normalized, that are beyond what we actually mean by film. I don't know if I'm answering your...
Is it obsession with a new innovative Western model instead of being more open?
The issue here is that, is there another model? We're trying to come up with another model. And we have the skill, the ability, the expertise, the stories. We have everything to come up with another model. And I swore that I wouldn't talk about financing. However, because the minute we get into funding, we go into a spiral. But that is the issue. As long as you believe, two issues, as long as you believe that you won't get the funding if it's in that format, you're not going to do, you think it's not good to do it. And the other one is our definition of success. As long as you think that your success depends on going to Cannes or going to Venice or going to Berlin, that's where we're going. And the beauty of what we have is still on the sideline. I do believe that we are getting over this hurdle a little bit. I believe that we're starting to say, Ammi Taib, what about Shahrazad? She was cool. So I think we are in a moment of change, but how do we get our young filmmakers to believe? I actually do not think that I've never, ever, what I produce, I can send to Cannes, but my films, I do not send to A festivals because they're not my audience. What is my film going to do in Cannes? Who's going to watch it? Whoever's going to watch it, I actually don't particularly want them to watch it. So why should I send it to Cannes? Do you see it? So it's important, I think.
No, it's great what you said. But you know what it's interesting, you ask about education. And I think I think, and this is one of my struggles, is what is applied to southern, from the south music films is not applied to an Occident filmmakers. Like they want voice over. No. But when they ask you, talk about yourself, do your voiceover, and I'm not against. I mean, I think that every film needs to find its own language, whether it's a voiceover, whether it's a commentary, as you mentioned it, or it doesn't matter. It needs to get to whatever needs to get so that the film is good as well, because you have to maintain this. Why are you telling the story? Why are you doing this? And this questioning is always important. But the thing is, they are framing and formatting our films in a frame because they don't understand it, and so they want to be so that we explain everything. And sometimes you struggle with that. How can you get more clever by letting them understand what you want to understand, but in a way that is clever and not only putting yourself in a film totally? You can put yourself, but when, how, why, and not only like, okay, the film is about me and I will film myself. I am doing this and this and this. I agree with you. There are limits and things to learn as well, and not to accept any language because it comes from somewhere else and it applies to someone else.
The kind of films we make don't really financially or otherwise allow for recce's, really. I mean, typically, I'll see something in the newspaper and then I'll go to that place in the hope that I will have access to what's happening, because being first is really very important. And also, anytime whenever I filmed on a recce, that stuff always ends up in the film, because the first time somebody tells you something is always the best. You never go back. So, I mean, it's risky, but there is a greater risk to go and have a meeting and go and have a recce and then go back again. I mean, that would be pointless, really. So.
Sorry. First of all, welcome to Jordan. My question for you, Mr. Mike, what's harder for you, starting the film or finishing it?
That is a very good question. I would undoubtedly say starting the film is easier than finishing it. Yeah, I mean, you start with all the hope and all the thing, and then you run into all these issues, and you think it's. And in a way, obviously the edit and the post-production process is the hardest part, really, because you're having to commit, and you're having to decide all the terrible rushes that you shot, how to make a film out of it. So yeah, I mean, I love the excitement of starting a film. You know, it has all that potential, and then you hit the issues, but so be it.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you guys for everything you're saying. It's really cool and it's really inspiring to hear everything that's being said. My question is, or I guess I have a preface to my question, if that's okay. I am now writing my first film, and I'm starting off with a theme that is very personal to me, but I feel like it's something that's not talked about enough. And I guess one of the struggles that I'm facing is I see it in life with different people, but because it's not talked about enough, I feel like it becomes like repressed. And I guess my question is that, like, during the writing process, how would you guys allow yourself to just put the words on the page and like express what you want to say? I don't know if that's a too specific of a question.
I guess, is it okay? There's the procrastination phase that happens to
Yes,
everyone.
I'm facing that as well, unfortunately.
Now, I think it's really about not trying to start at the beginning. It's how do you allow yourself to, I mean, my personal thing is note cards. Every note card has an idea, and then you kind of catch yourself going back to the same thing. And then you kind of identify your own, okay, that's the thing I keep coming back to. Let me start there. So it's not about, I don't think clarity happens kida as a wahi that arrives. I think that the legwork of trying, I also try questions. I ask myself questions. I have lists of questions. And then you try and boil them down. And out of, let's say, 50 questions, you actually finally realize that all you really have is 4 questions. All the others are going around the same thing. So there are all these devices to get rid of your own obstacles. It's there. If you've decided to do it, it's there somewhere. How do you organize your cupboard in a way that makes things visible enough for you to make choices, not just to yalla, I think.
Yalla is nice.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here with us. So I'm a film student, and I went into film thinking that I want to make films for the outsiders to look at us and understand why we are like this, and like maybe to gauge Western sympathy. But this past couple of years, I've realized that I want to make films from us to us, like from our communities to our own communities, from the indigenous to the indigenous, so we can understand our own histories and the roots of why we are the way that we are. But how do we start doing that? Like, from where do we start? How do we do that? Steering away from Western standards and commercial mainstream spaces.
Yes.
How? I mean, it's nicely put, I think, to say I will tell my story to my people. This is for me great, and if others understand it, then fine. Because once you will do it to your people, you'll be true to yourself. This is why I insist on using the word truth. truth is not about the truth. It's about the truth of a moment, of a character, of an energy, of a story, of yourself. Whenever you are true with yourself, you are telling your story, so it becomes your perspective. Then it will become universal, whatever you do. If you tell it in the right way, it will touch all the others. But if you start saying, oh, I want to tell a story for this and this and this, I think you will lose your authenticity somehow. So I think you should stay true to yourself, and of course learn the language so that you can be mastering something where you can do whatever you want, the way you want it.
I'll add a little bit onto that, which I agree with completely. I think one of the traps we're in, which I'm included in completely, is the us and them. Yes. How do we get out of the us and them and really believe that us is everybody? Yeah. Now, because we're at a disadvantage, because we're trapped in a way, we're kind of obliged to think us and them. But if we manage to find a way to speak to all of us, I think that would be addressing indigenous to indigenous in the same way as addressing the global. And it's a trap that we all fall into because of this system. How do you fight an established system? That's one of my favorite quotes, by the way. It's not me, it's Bucky Fuller. He says, what's the use of fighting an established system? You need to create an alternative that renders it obsolete. And how do we create that alternative that allows us to speak, all of us together? Together, it's the together that is interrupted at the moment.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and thank you. We're lucky actually to have this discussion with you, and yeah, and see you maybe in other panels. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.